Greetings, friends. Today is the 4th of July, Friday traditional military address with military expert Roman Svitan. If this is your first time on this YouTube channel, subscribe, like and click the bell to receive daily alerts about new military addresses with the expert. Roman defense forces have struck Russian Federation territory. This footage, which we haven't seen yet, shows an event 75 kilometers from Moscow. What is known about this strike? The strike was carried out on Sergiyev Posad, where an enterprise engaged in the development and production of pyrotechnic products is located. Well, pyrotechnics means gunpowder. That is, of course, there is a part of unambiguously now produced there, and drones, including certain combat stockpile systems of different levels, that is, under any systems, because any pyrotechnics related to gunpowder. Naturally, this is one of the military facilities that must be destroyed. But it's okay, it's the Moscow suburbs. It's still possible to get into the Moscow suburbs somehow. It is very difficult, by the way. The direction is blocked quite tightly for drones. Drones will not reach Moscow. Their density there exceeds certain coefficients of our possible pressure. It is simply unrealistic. Moscow can only be penetrated by ballistics. But in the Moscow suburbs you can still somehow get a nibble. But again, the effectiveness of such strikes is questionable. Drones in numbers of 1, 2, or 3 are not capable of causing serious damage to a military facility. The effect is possible only with mass use. If even 100 hit a single target, 20-50 kilograms of warheads could damage the surface, temporarily stop the technological cycle, but not completely disable the object. In the case of oil refineries, the situation is different. Even a single drone hitting the right spot is capable of stopping the operation of the plant for a long time. This is exactly how they acted earlier, but now these facilities are covered and the attacks have stopped. Therefore, we cannot speak about the effectiveness of the current strikes. The targets are chosen randomly, with the exception of oil refineries. It is really expedient to use drones against oil infrastructure and in Crimea, where it is possible to enter from the sea. Military facilities cannot be completely destroyed with their help, only damaged. The damage can be repaired in a couple of weeks. Thus, the usefulness of using drones against military facilities under current conditions remains doubtful. Roman, on Crimea, our defense forces released a video that shows how the Southern Defense Forces surface uncrewed vehicles struck serious radar systems on the night of the 1st to 2nd. Among them, not BM if memory serves. This system is worth tens of millions of dollars. It is not the most expensive, but it is a rare enough system, which is of great importance for the Russians. It is 3-positioned and forms an area of visibility for radar stations and air defense missile systems. It is critical for us to deprive the enemy of control over this section of the sky. In this context, drones are particularly effective in Crimea. From the sea, they can be approached using backs, after which the drones take off either as kamikazes or bombers, dropping aerial bombs or other munitions on the military installations with which Crimea is saturated. Crimea itself is at a disadvantage. It is an operational geographic cauldron, sandwiched by seas on 2 sides. It is possible to approach from the sea. The backs are suitable. If necessary, they can be covered. There is a nearby back with an anti-aircraft missile system, for example Magura B-6, which is used to cover against air threats. The missiles used are different, our R-73 and American AIM-9. Now it is worth paying attention to the British ASRAM, as the AIM-9 may be in short supply. ASRAM is essentially an analog of the AIM-9. The British have given us some Ravens, more than a dozen, and they are already being used in surface systems. However, they should also be used in surface systems, for example on uncrewed boats that can approach Crimea and use drones to destroy Russian air defense systems. At the moment, the Russians are actually losing control of the situation in Crimea. Over the past 3 to 4 weeks, more than a dozen radar stations have been taken out of service using exactly these methods. Additionally, long-range drones and strategic missiles have been used, but the focus should be on the pinpoint use of drones in Crimea. After that, we can move on to the next stage, cleansing the peninsula of the military presence of the Russian army. Roman, it has also been reported and already confirmed by the National Security and Defense Council that Russian Federation facilities in the city of Azov, Rostov region, were attacked. The settlement of Sergiyev Posad near Moscow is also mentioned. In Azov, an optic-mechanical plant was attacked. Local residents report that about 24 drones flew in, and explosions from hits were heard. This is an example of a competently planned attack, the direction to Rostov. The night strike on the Rostov region was prepared correctly and included a mechanism to break through the frontal air defense of the Russians in the Donbas region. Strike drones broke through the defenses, performed tasks in Makeyevka and Kursk, and then continued toward Rostov. The attack was combined, clearly coordinated, and aimed at accomplishing a specific combat task. In contrast, single or small drones that flew in different directions were shot down and did not reach their targets. Their use in this manner is ineffective. It would be much more sensible to concentrate all forces on one direction, such as Rostov. There are vulnerable targets there, such as the Novoshaktinsk refinery, which has long been a priority target. Even despite protection in the form of aramid nets, with enough drones it is possible to penetrate the defenses and cause serious damage. Now there is still a certain amount of volatility, but the good thing is that some units, probably the Air Force or the SBU, are taking the initiative. The security services, including units like Madeira, prepare operations competently, concentrate on one direction, collect enough drones and decoys, break through the frontal air defense, and then carry out the combat mission. In recent days, the SBU has been operating exactly in this format and doing it successfully. It is possible that the attack on Makeyevka, Kursk, and further on Rostov facilities is also their work. Among the targets are optical and mechanical plants, which play a key role in Russia's military production. Optics and electronics are especially in demand now, so the choice of such objects is justified. However, an important point has been missed. There is a large oil refinery nearby that supplies fuel to the southeastern grouping of the Russian army. It should be a priority target, as should the destruction of diesel and gasoline stocks that support the enemy's offensive operations.
Всю российскую армию, юго-восточную, по крайней мере, часть, снабжает дизелем и бензином. То есть уничтожать именно его надо. И, естественно, добивать основные запасы дизеля, бензина, которые сейчас идут в движении наступающей российской армии.
Roman, just now during our conversation, there was a news item concerning the oil refining industry and Russian energy sources. Andrey Badalov, vice president of Transneft, has died. He reportedly fell out of the window of his own apartment in Rublyovka. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, this is not the first time that high-ranking officials or top managers of Russian oil and gas companies have died in similar circumstances. Rublyovka symbolizes power and luxury, and in the event of strikes on Moscow, key targets are the Kremlin and Rublyovka as decision-making centers housing the political elite. It's possible that amid preparations for such strikes, someone involved experienced a crisis and took their own life, or more likely was helped to do so. A sarcastic remark, but a targeted elimination can't be ruled out.
И он сам решил покончить с жизнью. Но это, конечно, сарказм. Почему? Потому что, скорее всего, помогли.
Roman, it is also known that a military airfield in the Kursk region, called Kalino, was successfully attacked. The fuel and lubricants were blown up, and also, at least, the Panzer C-1 system was damaged. In general, Kalino in the Kursk region, are the Russians actively using this airfield? It's near Kursk, about 80-90 kilometers away. Some of our ground assets, including the HIMARS when properly deployed, reach there. They have previously carried out missions in the area. The main part of Russian aviation was withdrawn from there, first to Voronezh, then to Borisogledsk, and now it is based near Engels. There is virtually no aviation in Kalino, but the airfield is used as a transit depot for military materials. It is covered with air defense systems, including Pansiri, and is also equipped with airfield facilities that are used to maintain army aviation. Helicopters land, refuel, arm. The airfield serves as a tactical base near Skokie. The strike on this facility was absolutely justified and competently implemented. We have already received confirmation that the target has been hit, and we can talk about the clear and effective fulfillment of the task.
Ну, естественно, минусовано. Это вчера было, сегодня уже и зашло подтверждение, можно говорить о том, что грамотное и правильное выполнение.
Roman, there's a lot of discussion right now about Trump and Putin's phone call yesterday, and there was a combined Russian missile and drone attack on Kiev on U.S. Independence Day today, the night before the holiday. We'll come back to that, but just as importantly, what happened at the Chinese Foreign Ministry meeting with the European Union, because this is being reported by Beijing's official foreign policy publication, the South China Morning Post, which usually broadcasts China's position to an international audience. They report that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told EU spokeswoman Kaja Kallas, whom we know well, that Beijing could not allow Russia's defeat in Ukraine, because then the US would focus solely on confronting China. And we have been saying for 4 years now that the initiator of the idea of seizing its rabid dog, Russia, on Europe was China, was Xi Jinping. The Ying dynasty flash mob was launched for a reason. Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, Putin, Yeltsin, Lenin, Stalin, and other representatives of the conventional dynasty symbolize authoritarian regimes. China is clearly covering for Russia, although it does so not directly, but through intermediaries such as North Korea or other proxy structures. For example, the Geranium-3 drones are essentially Chinese-made Sunflower 200s, with major assemblies and units made in China. Thus, China is directly involved in the killing of Ukrainians, in the genocide of the Ukrainian nation, and in the aggression against Europe. It not only supplies technology, but also promotes its own ideology. It now realizes that Europe is beginning to consolidate and strengthen its own defense capabilities in response to growing threats. It clearly realizes that to ensure the security of Europe, it is necessary to destroy the remnants of the Russian Empire, destroy the Russian army on the territory of Ukraine, and push it outside the future European Union, of which Ukraine will eventually become a part. China will actively oppose this and has already openly told Europeans that Russia is its ally and will not allow it to be defeated or put in its place by force. He acts like an owner protecting his dog, and that's nothing new. Not to us, not to our listeners. We've been talking about this for 4 years now. It has been clear from the beginning that Putin's decision to attack Ukraine, and through it to put pressure on Europe, was coordinated with or received from Xi Jinping during the Beijing Olympics. These processes were predictable, as were Russia's shelling actions. Putin's latest attack was serious and consistent with the scenarios we discussed earlier. The Russians are assembling 50 to 100 drones over the course of a week to form a strike wave of up to 500 vehicles. They have limitations related to launches, control, and routing systems, so they can't go beyond that number yet.
То есть они в течение недели собирают там по 50, по 100 беспилотников для создания атаки где-то в 500, в полтысячи. У них есть определенные моменты, связанные с пусковыми установками, системами управления, маршрутизацией. То есть они пока еще за 500 сильно выйти не могут.
Russia produces about 150 to 200 drones daily, of which 50-100 are set aside to build up a strike reserve. When about 500 units are assembled, they are launched in waves about once a week. These attacks are accompanied or masked by missile launches, cruise, ballistic, or operational tactical. Today, for example, Iskander-K, North Korea's KN-23, a Chinese modification, and even the Dagger were used. This format of strikes will be repeated at weekly intervals, creating pressure on Ukraine. The reasons for the timing of the attack are also political. Today's strike is probably related to Putin's recent conversation with Trump. This is the fourth year we have emphasized how political events influence military action. Remember the grain deal when Erdogan and Guterres sat Ukraine and Russia down at the negotiating table. Then Russia, using the negotiation process as a cover, started issuing ultimatums and struck civilian targets, including Vinnytsia. We lost many children and civilian Ukrainians back then. It was a blatantly terrorist act that was nothing new. Putin has put forward his terms for Ukraine's surrender, and today Trump will deliver those terms to the Ukrainian leadership. Against the backdrop of this handover, the killing of hostages continues, and the hostage is now all of Ukraine. The strikes on Kiev are being carried out for the same reason that has been said many times. It is the capital, the center of decision-making and high population density. That is why the strikes on Moscow must be mirrored, so that they will reverberate throughout Russia. The Russians, acting like terrorists, choose targets with as many civilians as possible to damage infrastructure and spread fear. Putin's call with Trump, regardless of who initiated it, provided the political backdrop for another wave of violence. This is a genocidal regime in its purest form. To deny Putin the ability to use diplomatic contacts as a cover for terror, any form of engagement with Russia other than military should be stopped. Politicians like Trump, Erdogan, Macron, and other great negotiators should also be banned from mentioning Ukraine without our consent. We need to be explicit about the consequences. Today Trump talked to Putin. At night the missiles came. Putin, taking advantage of this contact, increased pressure and struck, killing people, destroying homes and infrastructure. This must be made public so that everyone understands that the responsibility lies not only with Putin, but also with those who give him political cover. The strike on Kiev this night is on Trump's conscience. He has no conscience in the usual sense, although conscience is the nervous system's response to a discrepancy between an action and inner beliefs. In his case, his beliefs are such that such actions do not cause internal conflict. It is possible that Trump deliberately requested a strike on Kyiv from Putin in order to negotiate with the Ukrainian leadership from a position of strength a few hours later, expecting that Ukraine would become more cooperative after the attack. This logic fits his way of thinking and value system, which was probably formed in early childhood. Psychological attitudes are laid down before the age of 5, and if we imagine what ideas were put into his mind by his parents, it becomes clearer why he is able to consider strikes on civilian infrastructure as an instrument of pressure on the Ukrainian people, army, and leadership in order to induce them to capitulate. Roman, after 6 talks between Trump and Putin since Trump took office, Trump said Putin told him directly he intends to continue the war. This wasn't through intermediaries. It was a direct quote. Right after, a missile attack occurred. What you mentioned may relate to Trump wanting to appear strong and decisive. Interestingly, yesterday came news of a partial suspension of arms deliveries to Ukraine. something we've already discussed. In fact, Trump said that he did not suspend anything, but it was said so clearly that he may not be telling the whole truth. But I'd like to talk to you about something else, Mr. Romanet. Just yesterday you said that the best option for Ukraine is to work with the United States of America through Europe. The Bild newspaper reports that the new German Chancellor Friedrich Merkel is in talks with the United States to buy armor for Ukraine. The new German Chancellor Friedrich Merkel is negotiating with the United States in order to purchase armaments for Ukraine. This is logical and does not require much revelation to understand how one can obtain the necessary armaments produced by private companies in the United States. Purchases can be made through third parties. At one time, for example, Morocco supplied us with certain items in this way. We should look for third countries and firms willing to act as intermediaries. The arms market is quite large and there are players on it who sometimes act independently of governments. It is a kind of state within a state. So the challenge is to find such channels and use them effectively to obtain the necessary weapons. For us, the best option is to turn to our European partners, because in the current conditions we are not fully capable of confirming the necessary financial and production capabilities. Europe realizes that by protecting Ukraine, it is also protecting itself. Therefore, it is extremely important to develop such contacts, especially with economically strong countries such as Germany and France. At the same time, the specifics should be taken into account. For example, France should not be asked for U.S. weapons, but should focus on what they can provide on their own. It is their own armaments that should be requested from France. They are actively cooperating and supplying equipment, demonstrating their readiness to support us. Great Britain and the countries of northern Scandinavia are also of interest, as they are united historically and politically into stable alliances, a kind of royal houses. Especially worth noting is the Danish initiative, which is aimed at financing not American, but specifically Ukrainian production, private companies that perform defense orders. There are many mechanisms that can be used if there is trust. This is a key factor without which no cooperation will be effective. Perhaps we should create a structure like a shadow cabinet of ministers or a military cabinet of people's trust to work both domestically and with foreign partners, especially those who do not always trust the current government, which is in its 7th year at the helm. This requires a thoughtful approach. It is possible to consider the possibility of involving Cossack organizations that are capable of initiating the creation of a civilian-level structure similar to the military cabinet of people's trust. Parallel channels of interaction and coordination can be built through such a structure. Distrust in the central government exists, and it is obvious. In the conditions of such distrust, the people's representatives can assume part of the functions of supporting the army through legal civilian institutions. This will make it possible to organize the supply and support of the armed forces within the legal framework. It is important to saturate the army with resources, both financial and productive, to the maximum extent possible. It is possible that such a military cabinet of people's trust will be able to interact directly with international partners, including the United States. Why not? In the United States, as in Turkey, there is a powerful lobby of retired military men, generals, colonels, majors, who have a good understanding of the situation and actively support Ukraine. Although they are not in power now and do not make decisions directly, their influence on public opinion and confidence building is significant. These parallel, essentially popular military ties need to be developed. It is through such channels that armaments for the Ukrainian army can arrive, regardless of official political decisions. This creates an alternative path that neither Trump nor the Israeli lobby in the U.S. or Moscow will be able to influence. It will be a purely military movement based on professional solidarity and understanding of the threats. The opportunity exists, and it is worth seizing. What is important is to think about how exactly to put it into practice.
Есть такая возможность, то есть надо ее использовать. Ну, посмотрим, подумаем, может быть, как-то ее исполним.
Roman, there's already word that U.S. military-industrial giants are in favor of giving arms to Ukraine. While the Pentagon says there's a crisis, a shortage of reserves, and the need to review supplies in the interest of U.S. national security, the founder of the powerful Andriy Industries Corporation has publicly said the United States should provide Ukraine with the weapons it needs. He wrote this on his social media. I wanted to ask you about this because we've said once before that despite the position of Trump and his entourage, which perhaps Yitsiu
лобі корпорації військово-промислового комплексу США дуже сильне, там причетні самі республіканці, і так просто, і так легко приймати рішення Трампу вони не даватимуть.
This is not necessarily about a specific scheme, but a similar mechanism. Trump may now have a goal of inducing the Ukrainian leadership to capitulate. One way to apply pressure is not to hand over already agreed weapons, such as missiles to Patriot systems, while effectively giving Putin carte blanche to strike Kiev. In such a situation, ballistic missiles would pass through the capital because the U.S. has not handed over the necessary defenses. The alternative is to launch parallel relationships with the owners of private defense companies. This is possible, but it is up to the military to initiate such contacts because civilians would have too many constraints. If the military establishes direct links, it is possible to organize supplies running parallel to government channels. Funding for this can be found. U.S. and European partners are ready to support such initiatives through non-governmental organizations. We do not use this potential because the office seeks to centralize all financial flows under itself. That is why neither the Europeans nor the Americans trust it. Meanwhile, it is possible to build parallel structures for financing and supplying weapons directly to the army, to each corps, to each brigade, bypassing the Ministry of Defense. Such a mechanism is real. It just needs to be launched. This issue should be promoted in the information space. It is necessary to create or involve sociological research centers in order to use them to form the military cabinet of people's trust, a structure that will include people who enjoy the trust of society. Optimally, these would be specialists with basic military education, capable of negotiating with the U.S. and European militaries and making informed decisions in the interests of defense. It is necessary to build cooperation with retired military officers, who today head private corporations that produce weapons. These structures are capable of supplying the front in parallel with official supplies from the Ministry of Defense, and often several times cheaper. Such a mechanism must be launched without delay. I appeal to all listeners. Think about how this can be realized, how to transform the idea into concrete steps. I read all comments. Send me suggestions, especially if there are new approaches or non-standard solutions. Now it is important to create a parallel flow of armaments to provide the army with everything it needs and strengthen defense. In the near future, we will have to buy light-engine airplanes to counteract uranium drones and for internal cover. These planes can be produced in Ukraine or purchased abroad. We have pilots.
Потому что еще впереди нам однозначно закупать те же легкомоторные самолеты от Германии, прикрыться оптимально внутри страны как раз легкомоторками. А их можно запустить и у нас производство аэрофрахтов, можно закупить и за кордоном, летчики есть.
Civilian pilots can fly for up to 70 years, and even those with health problems like me are capable of flying light-engine aircraft and performing combat missions, including the destruction of uranium drones. There is already a legal framework in place that allows the involvement of private entities in such tasks. However, the issue of mobile air defense teams needs to be resolved. It would be better to deploy them closer to the front line to avoid situations when they might mistakenly shoot down light-engine aircraft mistaking them for enemy targets. These issues need to be solved together by all the people. Ukrainians around the world, tens of millions, are ready to help. If, for example, Cossack organizations take the initiative, this could be a powerful impetus. We have serious Cossack organizations capable of launching such projects. This will be a purely Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian, Ukrainian-centric initiative aimed at protecting the state.
Есть структуры казачьи, которые могут инициировать такого рода действия. Это будет чисто украинская, проукраинская, украиноцентрическая задача для защиты нашего государства.
Roman, it is already reported that this night our interceptor drones were actively working against the drones of Russian geraniums. Tell us, please, what is your opinion, and what is the future of these interceptor drones? Can they really be a serious countermeasure against the drone attacks of the enemy? It is an important element of the counter-drone defense system, capable of taking on about 1/5 and possibly 1/4 of the tasks, about 20–25% of destroying enemy drones. This is especially true given the current problems with guidance and targeting. It is optimal to use such means in conjunction with mobile groups and Raven-type complexes. Let's not go into the discussion of Gazelles with R-73s installed. Let's focus on the Raven, which is a full-fledged military platform with 2 launchers and ASRAAM missiles. To effectively cover the front, 200 such units are enough. The radius of action of one complex is 10 km, which gives a diameter of coverage of 20 km. To provide protection along the entire 2,000-kilometer front line, about 100 such coverage zones would be needed, which means 200 Ravens, 2 for each zone for duty and rotation.
Значит, в радиус 10 километров, диаметр 20 километров. Вот сколько таких надо на 2000 километров фронта?
To ensure complete overlap of the front without gaps, 100 vehicles are enough, and for reliable overlap with reserve, 200. This is a realistic number. More than a dozen Ravens have already been handed over, and it is possible to start producing our own analogs of the same level. An integrated echeloned air defense system should include machine guns, anti-aircraft installations, intercepting drones, and short-range missiles with thermal homing heads. These 4 components are capable of providing defense along the entire front line, from Belarus to Odessa, a length of about 2,000 kilometers. Domestically, threats can be neutralized using light-engine aircraft, fighter jets, and mobile surface-to-air missile systems. This would significantly reduce the use of expensive medium and long-range missiles, saving them for truly critical targets.
Истребителями поднимутся истребители, легкомоторные, зенитно-ракетные комплексы. Намного меньше надо будет использовать ракет ЗРК средней и большой дальности, они очень дорогие.
Short-range missiles are costly, while medium and long-range ones can cost hundreds of thousands, or even millions, like the PAK-3 each. This makes creating a layered air defense with more affordable systems crucial. A frontline defense is now being set up, possibly controlled by Magyar's SBS, which would centralize coordination and prevent friendly fire incidents. Magyar already operates deep in the enemy's rear, so unifying drone and air defense control at the core level would improve effectiveness. His units have reached high efficiency, destroying up to 700, 800, potentially 1,000 targets daily.
Допустим, управление корпусного. Ну, это как раз Мадяр может разобраться в этом смысле. Сейчас он уже становится, они уже стали на крылу, можно сказать, до 1000 целей, ну, грубо там 700, 800, так реально до 1000 целей в сутки они минусуют.
Roman, in conclusion, sources report that Malyuk and his team, the security service of Ukraine, have liquidated the former head of the occupation administration of Lugansk. His name is Manolas Pilavov, or Pilavov. He headed this administration as a collaborator from 2014 to 2023, that is 9 years. Now he has been liquidated. Here is a picture of him. The occupation administration is part of the military structure of the occupying army and must be liquidated on an equal footing with it. Such formations are not subject to the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Agreements, or their protocols. They are considered illegal and must be destroyed. Since 2014, the Ukrainian Special Services, the Security Service, The main intelligence directorate, the Foreign Intelligence Service, and the Special Operations Forces have been systematically engaged in this task. All these structures work towards the neutralization of representatives of the Russian terrorist army and the occupation administration. As soon as an opportunity arises, the operation is launched immediately. According to a reliable source in the SBU, such actions continue and are coordinated at a high level. Roman, thank you for the summary and the conversation. Viewers, please follow Roman Svitan's advice. Be active in the comments. Share your suggestions and wishes. We read everything. Your feedback matters. Don't forget to subscribe. Many watch regularly but aren't subscribed yet. We welcome new viewers too. We work for you every day. Share our broadcasts and hit the bell to get daily military reports with expert Roman Svitan. I'm Ihor Havryshchak. See you on air on the 24th.